Hi, everybody, and away we go with another edition of the Stampede Wrestling Show.
Welcome to Heartbeat Radio. This is your guest host tonight, Johnny Mantell, and we're bringing you a special show tonight about the special one, Owen Hart. We're working on getting Bruce on air right now, and I know that early on I'm going to bring somebody out with me right now, so I got him on with me, and that's the buzzing man, Brian Blair. Brian, how are you?
I'm doing great, Johnny. Man, it's so good to talk to you right now. It's like I just saw you yesterday.
Well, you know, I tell people all the time, Brian, that when you're in this business and you travel and do the things that all of us did, we can go 20 years without seeing each other, and it's like seeing each other again. And it was a blast from the past to see you, and it was great seeing you. And we hope to see you again real soon, man. Jump right in and give us some thoughts and commentary on Owen.
Owen when he came into WWF, I guess 88, 89 there, Brett coming up to me and said, hey, my brother's coming into the territory, or coming into WWF. He called it the territory. But Owen's coming into the territory, and Brett and I are, close, always have been. I actually named my first son. We actually named our first son Brett, after Bret Hart. Only we Americanized it with 2 T's. And Brett says, listen, we got Kurt Hennig around, we got all these guys around, and Owen's coming in, and, I just, we're not going to be on the same cards, and would you mind watching over Owen? And I said, of course not, Brett, I'd love to. So Brett introduces Owen and I when he first came in, and we started riding together, and oh, God, what fun we had. And one particular time he said, hey, Brian, he said, with that little Canadian twang, he said, Chico State, we're going to California, and he said, Chico State University was rated the #1 party school, and if you go back, you'll see this is a fact, in Playboy magazine. When I start saying that, I think it's Stu, the patriarch. But anyway, I said, we can go there if you want. And anyway, we wound up going to Chico State University, and he said, I'd like to just go around and can we go to the dormitories? He was asking me if we could go to the dormitories and all this stuff. He knew I went to college in Louisville and trying to get me to do something. I don't know what he had on his mind, but we wound up going to this place called Madison Beer Gardens. And when we got there, it was great. We had a great time on the way there, but they didn't take dollar bills. And Owen, being the sly guy that he was, he pulls out a $10 Canadian bill, and we're in California. And, so anyway, I wanted to buy, you can't pay cash. So I bought $40 worth of Madison Beer Garden beer bucks. And I actually still have about 20 of them right now. And I don't know, I guess 10 of them are Owens.
Hey, Bruce, I got you on, man. I was just letting Brian tell the story while we were getting you on.
Oh, yeah, I've been on for about 20 minutes, but they got a few. Owen might be ribbing on the. He might be doing something to get a rise out of me here, from
he might be
above
stepping in and want Brian to pass that $10 on to him.
Yeah.
Well, I've got the Madison Beer Garden beer bucks right now, and we go to this place, and it's a really cool place, and there's a lot of people, a lot younger than us, and but we're having a good time. And Owen had all these great questions, and I forget who he randomly. There was a smart aleck there, and he decided to. The smart aleck kept being kind of smart aleck with us. Hey, I know you guys from TV. You're B. Brian Blair, you're the Killer B, and I'm not sure your name. You know, it was really like an introduction for Owen into the WWF. And finally we were talking to this guy a little bit, and he got a little bit more smart aleck, and I just happened to have some Visine on, and an old trick from Harley Race. And while we were at the Bear Gardens, Owen said, "Get out of that Visine, man. This guy's a pain in the ass." And anyway, he squirted like half the bottle in this poor guy's beer. And about 15 minutes later, the guy got so sick he ran out of there, and he was gone. But without embellishing and making this story more than it really was, it was a fabulous time, and Owen was just tickled to death that he could rib this poor college student, and I'm sure he went and had the defecation of his lifetime, because that's what the Visine does. And Owen was
holy shit.
So hard. Yeah. Owen was laughing so hard, and we were just sitting there the whole night, just looking and analyzing. I mean, we had more. We were trying to analyze people and say, well, what do you think this guy's going to major in, or what do you think this person's going to do, or this girl, or that? It was just a fabulous 2-hour, 3-hour time that we had at Chico State University. And Owen said to me, "Brian, this is like just a fantasy to me. I mean, I can't believe that we're doing this, man. This is Chico." I didn't know what he was really talking about, because I didn't pay attention to that kind of stuff. But to him, you know, being at Chico State University, the #1 partying college, according to Playboy, in the whole United States of America, Owen was making the most of it. And he made me laugh. And I mean, he made me laugh and cry almost, because I just laughed so hard at the things that he would do and say to these college students. He was the wittiest kid that I had ever seen in my life. And, you know, I just thank Brett for allowing me to, you know, to babysit basically Owen for probably six weeks. And, you know, he got, Owen obviously then went, he learned the ropes very quickly, as he did all through his life. And people can say, people with much more experience than I can tell you about Owen, how, you know, he just took everything in, and he was the life of the party. He was laughter personified. He was fun. He was a tremendous worker. He was tremendous at everything he did. And for the lack of stature and size, he made up for that 10 times in his ability to work. I mean, think about all the times when, you know, he had the ring in the backyard, and he would do all the flips and the things that I heard that he did. And I only got to go to Stu's place and the Hart Foundation, the Hart Mansion, when Owen passed, and went up there for his, his last respects.
I was greatly touched by guys like yourself, Brian, and everyone who was there. You know, it was like a real. It really meant a lot to. I know my dad and my mom and the rest of us. You know, you guys saw fit to take from your schedules and just come up. You know, and I'd like to definitely thank you again for your compassion and sincerity, just coming up at that time. You know, I remember it meant a hell of a lot to me and to everyone else. Just you guys were all there, you know, and it's like a big brotherhood, you know. So that really meant a lot to everyone. I didn't get a chance to personally thank you, but you know, I'd like to thank all the others if any of them are listening. You know, because as you recall, Brian, it was sort of like virtually everyone in the business, and I was touched by the fact that there was even a lot of non-WWF guys there at the time, like the Terry Funks and and Hogan was up there. He wasn't. I think he was in WCW at that time, and a lot of those other old legends. You know, you know, it was sort of like a who's who. So that was cool. I know my dad had even though it was obviously a very sad time, he had a great time just visiting and catching up with so many of those. A lot of those old guys that were, from his generation or the 60s and the earlier generations. And so yeah, that was one of the things I remember that really made a great impression on me, just how all you guys, were, decent and sincere enough to come up and just sort of be there for everyone. It did mean a hell of a lot to all of us.
Well, thank you, Bruce. You know, it just meant a lot just to be there, and of course we were there for Owen, but we were there for the family, because quite honestly, the Hart family. I'm from the school, the Matsuda School, which we always say is the toughest school in the world. When we're here in Florida, many guys ran away without their clothes, but then when I go back and hear all the stories with Stu in the dungeon and got to go there and see that, and I understand that, there was more than one toughest place in the world to break in. I would have hated to be one of the guys.
I remember Owen, he told me I remember I met you down in Hawaii, like 1980, I think, and you were down there at that time, and Owen was there with me, just sort of a little kind of a snot-nosed kid at that time. But I remember you and Kevin Von Erich and
absolutely
a few others that were down there at that time, during that so-called promotion down there, and Owen. I remember at that time he was a huge fan. He was just a kid then, but he was greatly impressed with you and Kevin, and I think there was a few others that were down there that were, sort of, already sort of had established themselves as kind of top-notch stars. It meant a lot to him that you were even, kind of decent enough to acknowledge him and treat him well back then. I think Dwayne Johnson was kicking around then. He was sort of around the same age as Owen, sort of, but it did mean a lot to him even at that time that, us professionals like you and Kevin and some of them were, treating him, and not like a mark or whatever, So, but yeah, I remember it did stick in his mind. I remember years later I met Brian Blair, I met Kevin Von Erich. Like that was, great. Made a great impression on him. So.
Well, I tell you what, Bruce, I remember that now as you just rang the bell in my mind, and I remember that so vividly now, and always like Owen came from what you are and what the entire Hart family, those that I've been around and those that have broke in the territory there, and you can go on. I mean, it's like who's who, but everybody had respect. And
I remember he had. I think at that time you were Leroy's son-in-law or something like that, or so. I know he had. Owen was kind of like he'd grown up hearing Stu talk about all these iconic old legendary promoters and wrestlers, and Leroy was one of them, so that seemed to mean a lot to Owen too, that your affinity to legendary Leroy McGurk type thing, so that, but yeah, it's funny how little things like that seem to stick in his head. Those things kind of almost kind of reinforced his respect for people if they were part of the the old school fraternity, or they had some roots in the business type things. So, but yeah, I remember that was quite vivid. I remember Owen was like, "Wow, I got to meet Kevin Von Erich and Brian Blair. That was pretty heady stuff for him back in those days. I think he was maybe about 14 or something like that at the time, so it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, it was. And, I was like 6, 7, 8 years older, and somewhere around there, and it was a good time. I enjoyed that the whole Hawaii thing, and not to sidetrack, but Kevin's a great guy, and I know that Kevin was that having the Von Erich legacy and the Hart legacy right there in Hawaii. I'm still a wrestling fan, and
yeah, I think that's you and Johnny both. Myself, it's I'm still passionate about the business, and I still kind of applaud a great match, and I gnash my teeth at proliferation of bullshit and stuff like that. I'm always sort of seeing things about how the wrestling business comes out looking after something, and sometimes I'm like, good on them, even when I see stuff on Vinny's stuff or whatever, and unfortunately all too often I come away sort of shaking my head and saying, this isn't good for the business, or it doesn't reflect well on what all these old guys like Leroy and Stu and Fritz and all these other guys were seeking when they were, trying to make the business take it to the next level or whatever, But
yeah, the evolution of the business is dynamic, and there's, without a doubt, if you take away the foundation, and of course, Stu and your family is part of the foundation, and you go up to Minneapolis was a foundation, and Florida was a foundation, and of course Vince Senior, he had his foundation there, but nobody broke in there. It was either Calgary, it was Minneapolis, or it was Tampa. Those were the three territories where people broke in, and they were respected for. Correct me if I'm wrong, Bruce and Johnny. You know that. I mean, even Texas, and there was a lot of great places to break in. But as far as shooting and the dungeon type style, where people, whether you liked it or not, you either had to learn to survive with guys like your father, Hiro Matsuda, and Vern Gagne and his crew there that he would have.
Yeah, old Peasant Deck and Butch Levy and some of those old Rheingans later and some of them. But yeah, that was it was all about instilling respect, and sort of. But I guess the proof is in the pudding, because so many guys of great character and great workers, guys that were a great testimony to this business, seem to emerge from that. Environment, and I think it was about respect, I think Stu always told me it's not all about respecting themselves, but it was about respecting the business, and because of that, they, would defend it and, kind of uphold the integrity of it, and I think that's something that don't like to be railing on modern generation all the time, but I think all too often it's lost in the shuffle with some of the deviations I see today, and I don't want to digress in this program because I want to reflect more on Owen, but yeah, that's something that I think needs to never be lost as far as just the respect for the business and respect for yourself and for the people in it. If there's, I think, more of that, I think the business would be infinitely better for it.
Yeah. I agree, but and like you said, let's not digress. I mean, there's a lot of people that want to talk about Owen right now, and I just wanted to share my Madison Bear Garden story. It was the Chico State thing was the beginning of something that was very close for Owen and I, and it was a lot of fun if you can see that guy. It's just Oh, my God. But anyway, I have all smiles, and I know Owen is listening to this right now from another place. I have so much faith in God, and I believe that Owen is there in spirit with us right now, and he's going to hear everybody that's about to speak. And I don't want to step on anybody's toes. I mean, there's a great lineup. You got a great guy, Bob. Bob is a super person that lined all this stuff up, and you got Johnny Mantell, and what more can you say about a guy? And, you know, fabulous guy. You know, Johnny's right there, you know, hosting this program, and so, you know, I'm going to leave what I said and let everybody else share their stories, and I look forward to listening. If anybody else has a question or something, that's fine, but otherwise I just want to listen and be a mark.
Thanks so much, Brian, for being a part of the show tonight. The story and the ribs from Owen are classic, and that was a great way to start the show off. You know, Bruce, a great story, and I got to interject something here. I'm sort of an outsider. I had the privilege of meeting Owen one time. I don't know him as well as a lot of the boys do, but to me, I always took from our short meeting and our short visit, I took that here was the youngest of a family of legends, and he's taken a little bit from everybody. And with that, the cream will sort of rise to the top, and I always felt that was Owen's place in my mind of Owen Hart. So,
yeah, it's very nice of you to say, and I agree. You know, he's sort of, for want of a better term, I think he, you know, he learned a lot from the screw-ups of some of his older brothers, myself included. And, but he you know, learned a lot, and he was always there for everyone, you know, and he was kind of exactly like you said, the cream that rose to the top. You know, he had a bit of Brett or a bit of Keith or a bit of, you know, some of the other family members, and he seemed to, you know, distill it and come out as a hybrid, you know, because he's, you know, just was sort of a special person, you know.
Absolutely. Hey, let me get to the phones to our next caller. I believe I got the Godwins on. Hey, Dennis, how are you, my friend?
Hey, good. How are you?
I'm
good to hear from
man.
you, Dennis. Thank you for calling.
Hey, no, my pleasure.
I'm looking forward to hearing a few Owen stories from.
Yeah, I was listening to Brian and that. Yeah, that was pretty good.
Yeah, I know. And I heard he had, you know, kind of partaken in a few in ring and out of ring, you know, antics with you guys. You know.
Oh my God! I'll tell you this. I had some of my favorite matches with when Davey and Owen were together, and I had some of my just the most frustrating matches that you could ever imagine. When they wanted to work, there was nobody better. But you know, the house shows and everything. Oh my God, it was too funny. They would like have contests to see who could take like the lowest hip toss, and like we would do stuff that we would set up spots over, you know, the whole time on the road, and then one night they would just change it without telling anybody, and it would just make you so mad. But you know, that was Owen and Davey. What were you going to do? You know?
Yeah, I saw all kinds of that stuff with them, you know, and I actually did a few tours with Owen, and when they're doing that heart attack tour, and after Owen had turned heel, and it was Neidhart and Owen were, Brett and I were tag teaming against them, and every night Owen was up to some kind of just little pranks, and you know, the best thing about Owen's ribs is you never quite knew if they were a rib or whether, you know, afterwards, you know, find myself thinking, you know, why was I getting pissed off or what? You know,
I know, what can you do? I mean, if it was a pay-per-view or TV or something, you know, and
you're never quite sure, you know. I'd be like, was that a rib or you know, and everything from Owen having some guy knocking on your hotel room door at 8 a.m. and telling you got to check out at noon and shit.
Yeah. Yeah, and you never a lot of people to your rooms in the middle of the night.
Yeah, and afterwards I found myself saying, was that a rip or was that a-hole really, trying to get me up at 4 hours before I'm supposed to check out to get, stuff like that. He's always, but it was always harmless stuff. But
oh yeah, it was Owen. You just pretty much you pray for the best, and you just hope that it was going to be a night that he felt like doing something. But then again, how many matches? You're doing 5, 6, 7 times a week. You don't really want to do 1 or 2 of them. So the rest of them, you pretty much just, we're lucky to have Owen because it made the matches a lot more fun than instead of just doing the same thing over and over and over. But
he never took himself. He didn't mind making fun of himself or poking fun of himself.
No.
Once in a while too, And,
that was the thing. Most of his ribs in the ring were on himself. Where he ended up looking like the idiot, and he was just, he would laugh harder than anybody. It was great.
You have one quick good story? I got so many people wanting to call in. You got one good story we can get out of here with?
Oh yeah, I got one good one. We were up in. We were in like St. John's or Newfoundland or somewhere like that, and we were at the hotel, and they had these vans that were taking us to the arena, and it was Blackjack Lanza and Tony Gurria were our agents, and we were all waiting in the van, and they were back in their room and everything, and they were getting ready to come out, and Owen decided he didn't want to wait, so he jumped in the front seat and took the van without them knowing it, and we drove like past the building and around the building like 2 or 3 times. And none of us are from, Newfoundland, so we didn't know where the hell we were going. And we were just in the thing. We're like, oh, and isn't that the building? He's like, oh, no, you got to go around this way. And he did it like 5 times. So we spent about a half hour on a 10-minute trip. It was he got so much trouble. It was hilarious. And he didn't care.
Yeah, but again, harmless trouble, right? I mean, really, truly.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean you're up there in the middle of nowhere, and it's Lanza and Tony Gurria yelling at him. It wasn't like Vince was yelling at him, so he didn't really care. As long as everybody had fun.
Well, I'll tell you what. I imagine that Lanza deep down inside was probably laughing, thinking, "Boy, that was a great one right there. I wish I had thought about that in my day, right?"
Oh yeah, and Tony and Blackjack didn't get to the building until like after the show started because of that. It was one of my favorite times of not knowing what the hell was going on, which with Owen was a lot of times.
Well, hey, I think I've got the other Godwin on finally with me.
Yeah, there he is.
Hello.
Henry.
Yes,
Mark.
That's Henry.
Yeah. Hello?
Yeah,
Mark.
That's you, Mark. Talk.
Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you, Mark. Go right ahead, my friend.
What the hell's going on? What are y'all doing?
See, that's Owen right there. Owen's doing that.
Yeah. Pushing the mute button or something.
Exactly.
I just got on the line here, so I don't know where you guys are at.
Well, all we're doing is sort of respecting Owen and talking about the business, and Dennis just gave us a good story, and we'd like to hear one from you, so we get the Godwin's opinion on Owen tonight.
Me and Phineas was working, him and Owen and British Bulldog.
Yeah, I just was telling that.
At Penn State University. And Owen had come out, and we were in the ring for like 5 minutes. And then him and Phineas locked up, and he spit water in Phineas's face. He'd been walking around clapping people's hands and had a mouthful of water and wrestled for like 5-6 minutes and then spit it in Phineas's face.
Yeah.
So that was sort
fun.
of just classic Owen, little things like that.
Isn't that amazing? It all goes back to the Owen and Davey Boy tag team. I wonder how much trouble they caused for everybody else, just those 2 guys.
God, I don't know. Lots of headaches, yeah.
Lots
of good times.
Yep.
I remember one time we had a guy up here you guys probably know named Brian Pillman, and
oh yes, we know Brian.
Pillman was a bit of a notorious womanizer type thing, but anyway, we were on we were on the road and we were headquartering in some beach town out in British Columbia, and Owen overheard Pillman, who was on the other side of the stone wall at the beach, arranging a rendezvous with this fairly hot girl after the matches, and I think we had to go to some town that was like 60 miles out or something like that. And, anyway, just to get a rise out of Pillman, Owen has this poor hapless road agent come up to Pillman and say that after the matches, I've got you going to this senior's home to do a Say No to Drugs speech. Initially, it was just to get a rise out of Pillman, but Pillman reacted so vehemently and vociferously. He's like, fuck that, and dropping all these F-bombs. And so at that point, it became a challenge to Owen, so we ended up driving across town and waking up this old caretaker who got all these seniors out of bed. And it took them about half an hour or more to get out in their walkers and their wheelchairs.
That's hilarious.
And then Owen tells his caretaker that Brian's going to now do his Say No to Drugs speech, and that he's driven halfway across the country to come here for this thing, and the regional health board had set it up or something. And so anyway, Pillman finally does this speech, and it was about the most half-hearted Say No to Drugs speech you ever heard of. And then in the meantime, Owen gets this old caretaker and says, "You don't have any coffee," or we have, next thing, this old caretaker's telling Pillman he's got coffee and cake coming, and Pillman's getting madder and madder. But it was like
having Brian do a Say No to Drugs speech would pretty much be like having me and Mark do a Say No to Drugs speech.
Yeah, it'd be like wiping before you poop.
I'd like you guys both to know Owen held you guys both in the highest regard. He's used to speak so well of both of you guys. So I'd like to take the opportunity just to thank you guys and thank you for all you did for Owen. It meant a lot to him at the time too. You guys were two of his brothers. So
him and Davey Boy were both a big part of our career. We knew him for a long time. I knew Owen even before I started down in WCW. But we just want to thank the whole family and wish Owen's better half and the kids. Haven't seen them in a long time, but wish them the best, and we still think about them. And we just appreciate the time we had with them.
To the Godwins, thank you guys so much for being on tonight, man. God bless you. Thanks for the comments. Have a great night. I know I got a caller holding right now that we'd like to bring on, and that's the referee that was there the night that Owen left us, and that's Jimmy Korderas. Jimmy, are you there?
Yes, I am, gentlemen. How are you?
I'm delighted that you were able to get through, and just thanks very much. It's a privilege to talk to you.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Jimmy, any of your perspective of Owen, any thoughts you may have or funny little stories? I seem like I've met you, but I don't know that I have. But I'm telling you, it's great to be on with you tonight talking about Owen.
Oh, thank you very much. And I'm pretty sure my brains are a little scrambled too. So trying to remember everybody that I've crossed paths with over the years, and I'm sure we've run into each other. I've been listening to the stories with the Godwins and with Brian Blair, and just some hilarious stuff. The Godwins were talking about working with them as a tag team. Even refereeing with Owen in the ring was challenging and fun at the same time. I remember one instance in particular, and you talk about when he teamed with Davey Boy, but he also teamed with Jeff Jarrett, and they would also like to have fun too, and they were wrestling Edge and Christian, and I want to say this was in Germany. And, I got distracted by Jeff, of course, and then behind my back, Owen reaches in his tights, and he pulls out this foreign object, and he blasts Edge with it, and Edge is selling like he got hit with a ton of bricks, and Christian's jumping up on the apron, and we go through the whole motion. They're creatively hiding it behind my back, and I still don't know what he's got. It's just that, you know, he's hitting him with his foreign object the whole time, and the last thing he does is he hides it under his arm, and I challenge him to lift his arms, and I start counting, and when I get to 4, he lifts his arm, and a napkin comes floating down. So the whole time, the big foreign object that Edge is selling like brass knucks is a red napkin.
I was wondering, Jimmy, if you could share with us that other rib you told us about Owen. I think maybe it was involving the Godwins, but you'd written about it in your book about Owen and the livestock or whatever.
Yeah, there was a match years ago. It was a hog pen match or a pig pen match, and I didn't witness it, but apparently somehow the pigs that they had rented for that match somehow found their way into Vince's office. Apparently the guy who delivered them, you know, happened to show up just when Owen happened to be near the back door when he arrived and asked where to put them, and Owen directed him, "Oh, here you go. We'll just put them in here. They'll be fine for a while." And after the production meeting, you know, Vince came back to the office. There's these pigs in the office, and he was, I guess, upset but not upset because I guess he figured out who it was, and you just couldn't get mad at him. It was just too funny.
I remember one rib that I think I may have told you this one myself, Johnny, but I remember one time we were on one of those inordinately long, hot, dreary road trips out in the middle of Saskatchewan, which is sort of like the hinterland or whatever. But anyway, we'd been riding for about 8 hours in sweltering van and all this, and we're pulling into this town. Pillman's just awaking from a stupor, and there's this town we were going to. It was called Tisdale, and it says, "Welcome to Tisdale, the land of rape and honey." And I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with rapeseed. It's like canola oil comes from or something. Anyway, Pillman wasn't familiar, and he says, "What the hell is that?" He's kind of half foggy, and Owen launches into this thing about, you can believe it, they have the highest incidence of rape and sexual abuse in North America in this particular town, and they're actually proud of it, you know, and they encourage their women to dress provocatively and sit out on the back porch and, kind of, tempt these, people from the nearby prison and all this stuff. But anyway, Pillman went on to this big, long diatribe before his match that night about, I understand that some of you people think it's cool to, have your daughters and your wives and, engage in, unsolicited sexual whatever. And the people are all sitting there dumbfounded. And I think Pillman was working with this big heel named Bastion Booger, Mike Shaw, that night. And Mike Shaw gets on the mic and says, "Hey, Pillman, it's their business, not yours." They all started cheering for Mike Shaw and booing Pillman. And I remember years later, Pillman would still be calling me up, fuming about, he referred to this town as Tisdale as Tisdale, and both those idiots who want their wives being raped and all this stuff, And, but that was kind of like one of those Owen things that just sort of manifested itself, But
I got another caller in the queue. Again, another star of this business I didn't have the privilege of meeting, but I've seen her many times on TV. I've read many articles and many things with her name in it. Calling in tonight and helping us give the tribute to Owen that he deserves, Debra McMichael. Deborah, how are you tonight?
Well, hi there. I'm doing really great tonight.
Great to hear your voice, Deborah. I very vividly remember having a chance to meet you, unfortunately, at Owen's funeral, but I know Owen, he told me that was like the high mark of his career when he was doing the thing with you and Jeff Jarrett down in WWE, just unfortunately before his accident. He had nothing but the highest regard and nothing but nice things to say about both of you guys. So I know it meant a lot to him that you took from your schedule to even come on and just tell a few Owen stories or share some memories.
Oh, no, he was really special. I used to have so much fun working with him. He used to keep me and Jeff used to laugh constantly at Owen. Oh, my gosh. I mean, there were so many funny stories that Owen would do. I mean, I remember sometimes, like, you know, after a match we're all going to the hotel and you're going down, you know, everybody's rolling the luggage down through the hallways, and he was notorious for, if he, you know, was walking by a room and someone's snoring in the room, he would run down the hallway and he would use the phone to call that person's room just to wake them up. I mean, he would be rolling. I mean, he would do this all the freaking time. And one after the other. I mean, one time I remember we were at, oh God, it was somewhere like in Texas, and it was where the audience was like behind a curtain, so we were backstage and we could actually see their feet if we like peeked around the curtain. And so for one night, I think he was doing this with gold dust, and they found these like, there was this long clamp things that they're called like pickup tools or whatever they're called. They're like, you know, 2 feet long, 3 feet long. And so he would reach in between the curtains and he would grab people by their ankles. And they would scream, oh my God. And they didn't know where it was coming from because they couldn't see us, you know, because we were behind them. I'm like, and I mean, it was stuff like that. I mean, and then one time I was at a house show and he had found this sticker and stuck it on my back, and it said out of order. And, like, you know, I'm in the ring doing my whole Deborah, puppies thing, yada, yada, doing all that with this big old out of order sticker on my back. I mean, you had to watch him constantly for doing stuff like that to embarrass you. But, you know, it was all in fun. I mean, and then I still remember he was always wearing, like, one boot that was different from the other boots, just to see, you know, if anybody noticed. Or, and he would always hide stuff under the ring. Like, you don't know what in the world he's going to drag out at a house show. I don't know. You know, like, it would be coat hangers one night. It would be pieces of clothing. I mean, you don't know what in the world he's going to have. You know, it's like he's like a pet rat. He would hide it before the match.
That would make it premeditated. So yeah, go right ahead.
I mean, just saying. I mean, and I remember it was down. I would say it was the last autograph session I remember doing with Jeff and Owen. And
I remember seeing a picture of that. For some reason, I remember seeing a picture of you and Owen and Jeff doing an autograph session somewhere. Probably, maybe even would have been in KC or something. I don't know, but.
Well, I remember that one. It was in Florida, and Randy was the promoter that had brought us in, and it was funny because now he's the tour manager for Larry the Cable Guy, and I remember I just ran into him about a month ago, and he actually still had pictures on his phone from that autograph session, and it was just so cool to see those pictures. And I remember Owen would, for that day, I do remember he like changed out my sunglasses and he put these like hideous looking sunglasses. Oh my gosh! And you know, I'm trying to be all cute and cool back then, you know, putting on my little glasses, trying to look like a little Hollywood person. And he had switched them out to these awful-looking glasses, and I'm walking out through the autograph session thinking I'm looking cute, not knowing I had on those hideous sunglasses. I mean, you know, he was good at it, those jokes.
I'm so grateful, and I was delighted when I heard you might be coming on, you know, because I know you're one of those people that had a special place in Owen's heart. You know, I remember many a time him just sort of extolling all the virtues, you know, great people you and Jarrett were, you know, how much he loved working with you guys, and just how much he respected you guys. You guys were really great people and great company. So.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, I was honored that you guys asked me. I mean, I was honored to be asked to do this.
I'd like to also mention just beyond his contributions and, lightening the load and all that, also very undersung, understated worker. I think a lot of people almost didn't realize. I think he was just on the threshold of really ascending to superstardom. He reminded me a bit of like Daniel Bryan, who was kind of doing a few other roles that were mid-card and all like that, and then he seemed to finally ascend and take the ball and run with it. And I have a feeling Owen would have been like that. He had been sort of in Bret's shadow and kind of initially when he first came in there, like Brian Blair was mentioning earlier, they weren't pushing guys his size as much, but right around the time when he unfortunately died, his he was sort of getting the singles push, and I think he was starting to be recognized. And the thing about it for me, Owen was a phenomenal worker from the get-go, and it wasn't like he was sort of developing. He was one of the best rookies I ever saw when he broke in. He was kind of like, possibly the best rookie I ever saw. And I think even that Wrestling Observer guy, Dave Meltzer, referred to Owen as the best rookie he had ever seen. But that was sort of one of the sort of ironic things. Right around the time when Owen unfortunately died, his career was just starting to really take off. You'd sort of emerged from Bret's shadow and was kind of getting the singles push, and things were just starting to kind of, look like they were going to take shape for him. So that was sort of one of the sad ironies of the whole thing, too. But I didn't want anyone, the listeners out there, to think my only reflections on Owen was as a practical joker, because he was a really world-class worker. He reminded me of like Daniel Bryan is the closest thing that I can compare him to, and he was also one of those guys that really gave a lot of good energy in the dressing room and was always sort of like one of the team players, and you would know, you need that kind of good energy in the dressing room. It sucks when everyone's kind of down and everyone's bitching about the payoffs and the road trips and having to do a job or whatever, and it's nice when you got a few guys that sort of keep everyone's spirits up, and that was one of the other things that Owen really kind of seemed to just innately have a capacity to do.
On the line with us now, a dear friend, Owen's a guy for the business and for many years has been a wrestling fan, let alone a wrestling star, the one and only Mick Foley. How are you, Mick?
Hey, I am doing good, and I'm really honored to be part of this show. Thanks for thinking of me.
Thank you, Mick. I'm honored that you saw fit, and I don't need to tell you, but I'd like people out there to know that Owen was one of your biggest fans. He had the utmost respect and just loved you as one of the truly great guys in the business, and he held you in the highest regard. I'm sure you know that. So I just like the fans to know that.
You know what? So thanks, Bruce. And I think that the highest compliment I can pay our friendship is, and don't ruin this for me. And Brett kind of let me know. I was like, no, don't tell me, I don't want to know. But I never actually knew what Owen thought of me as a wrestler. Our friendship was based entirely on how we got along as people, as family men, and I think of everyone I've met, like Owen reminded me the most of myself. Probably the best part of me was what Owen was. So I really enjoyed his company, and to this day missed him terribly. It was a devastating blow.
he always told me that you were one of those guys that was way more concerned with getting the other guy over than yourself, and to him that was one of the hallmarks of the really great workers, of the guys that really made him appreciative of and grateful to, so he seemed to hold you in high regard just for that. Your almost everything you did was more designed to get the other guy over than yourself, and it was never about yourself or your ego. It was about the other guy in the business. So, but that was definitely the way he perceived you, and that was sort of like the highest regard he could hold a wrestler in, was somebody that was doing it for the business and for the boys, and not just for themselves, and there's not enough guys that are like that, so.
Well, I appreciate it. I know that when I was, done with a program, we didn't have the same way of gauging, the success of a program the way you guys would on a weekly basis, where, you would come in, you'd be able to tell who specifically was drawing the house. Like an Abdullah the Butcher would come in and pop the territory, and things of that nature. So I always, and then I guess you could tell by, with ratings and with pay-per-view buy rates. But since I wasn't in a position for most of my career to be that guy, that one guy on top, I always gauged how well my programs went by whether or not the guy I worked with was better off after he was done with me. And I was really proud and happy when someone's was ready, was in a better position to help the company when he was through, and considered it a failure. Even if we had good matches, I would consider it a failure if it was like, man, I didn't elevate that guy. So I appreciate that, Bruce. I don't know if guys, how many guys think of their careers in that way, but up until like the late 98, 99, that was my primary concern. What can I do for the other guy?
Oh, Owen told me that he sort of identified with you a lot, because he said he and you seem to have more incarnations or personas than damn near anyone. He said you were Dude Love, and you were wearing the leather mask, and you were Cactus Jack, and Owen said he had been the Blue Blazer, and he had been High Energy, and he had been the American Eagle, and all this other, and so he said he sort of respected you coming from a promoter's family too, that you were one of those guys who didn't put himself ahead of the business, or he always sort of went about it with a smile, and if they wanted you to do this finish or that finish, or Owen loved the comic end of it too. He respected that from you too, that you didn't mind, for want of a better term, making an ass of yourself. And he was sort of the same. Whatever. I think that was one of the reasons why he was well regarded by his peers, as are you. Because it wasn't about you. You're just not only entertaining the fans, but the boys were entertained by it too. They kind of enjoyed it, and I think they respected that you guys checked your egos at the door. Didn't have any egos to check at the door. And
what else? I think both of us took great pride in the fact that we could really turn it on, and Owen had those great world-class matches, but entertain not only the audience, but the boys. Owen would, he would draw those curtain sellouts for some of those matches. I'd never seen someone have a bad match on purpose, and you have to have a lot of confidence until I saw Owen doing it in Scranton, Pennsylvania, with the big giant steps across the ring, and not bad. I mean, not bad in the sense the fans were going, "Wow, this is not a good match," but the overselling of certain things, the underselling of big moves, and doing it like you were saying to keep a light atmosphere on the road, things can get heavy. You can get a little dejected about payoffs. And then, going into a place like the Scranton Youth Center, back when we used to run that the payoffs are not going to be much of a reflection. And so if you can get the guys laughing and looking forward to shows like that, that's a big burden off the off the shoulders on nights like that. So I always enjoyed those matches. Enjoyed the anything goes matches with Owen because if we had to, we could really turn it on. But there were other times when we would just go out there, just had fun, and I think that's infectious among the fans, even if they know that these guys are not. I mean, they're enjoying themselves out there, and like I said, I think that's infectious. Yeah,
I totally agree, and as you were saying too, his infectiousness seemed to permeate to the boys as well. Or even sometimes the good thing with Owen's ribs, I always found was I was never quite sure if it was a rib or not. Even to this day, stuff that I now reflect back and know, was that a rib or what? Owen was that slick at it that he never quite knew whether you just some guy was really annoying you or whether it was. And Owen seemed to have a marvelous ability to impersonate people. So I remember. I remember one time there was, I think you may have been down there, was at one of those WrestleManias or one of those pay-per-views, and Owen, for some reason, they had flown my mom and dad down there for this thing, and there's a few of the old wrestlers down there, and there was this old guy named Reggie Parks. I'm not sure if you ever heard of him.
Yeah, the guy who made the belts, yeah.
And he had originally broken in Calgary in maybe the 50s. He's a fairly mild-mannered guy, and he had gone through the ringer down in the dungeon with Stu and George Gordienko and some of those old shooters and got mauled and stretched and all like that. But anyway, I guess Owen found out that Reggie was down there. He had broken in Calgary and had been around Owen about 20 years. And Owen calls up Stu's hotel room as Reggie Parks and is kind of speaking kind of really hesitant, stammering, and kind of, Stu, I've got something I need to, and Stu was originally happy to talk to him, and eventually Reggie's like, when you took me down in the gym in 56 to, you took advantage of me and all like this, and Stu's what are you getting at, Reg? Next thing, Owen's like, just you and me, Stu. About 10 minutes later, Stu meets Reggie in the lobby, and Stu is kind of all worked up, and Reggie's a pretty mild-mannered guy, and Stu comes up and says, take your best on, Reg.
I should tell him that. I'm like, I can't even conceive of doing that same type of rib of my own dad. Like, I can't.
Reggie wasn't sure whether Stu was something he had done, but Stu was like. But Owen was. That was kind of one of the ones I remember. There's so many, but I don't want to, as I said before, digress just into a dissertation on the ribs and all that either, But
yeah, we had I specifically remember he would let you in as you were headed out the door. Meaning, like in the one case where he had gotten me a really good rate at a hotel room, and then called up as the innkeeper, saying they'd checked their records and that they'd actually undercharged me, and that I was going to have to come down and pay extra money. And now you get worked up about that, then he starts asking you about wrestling and how fake it is. So first he's going to charge you more money, now he's going to insult what you're doing. And I remember I almost got him to pop because, I was using some line that somebody else had told me. He goes, he was a Scottish man on this occasion. I said, then just how much of that wrestling is fake? And I said, about we try to keep it at around 27%. One guy got up to 30, and we had to let him go. And then later on, he told me, he goes, "You almost got me. You almost got me to pop." And he goes, "Oh, Mr. Foley, that's very funny, but I saw you stamping your foot on the ground." And then he gets you, you're like, "I'll be right down." That's when you hear the laugh, and he lets you in. But I know what you mean. You don't want people to think it was all about the ribbing, because so much of his legacy was what he was able to accomplish in the ring. I've still never seen like the groundbreaking stuff he did in Stampede. And he really took the world by storm. I've yet to see that, or some of the. I did see some of the great stuff he did when he was in New Japan, coming in. Hard to believe that he had as little experience as he did when he went over there. I guess growing up in a wrestling family will give you confidence and experience without actually having the ring time.
I was actually blown away. I was booking when he started, and we were sort of getting the territory reopened, and we've been kind of struggling. It hadn't been really going that well, and Owen, my dad was reluctant to even put him in the ring, but Owen, I guess, was getting screwed around on his scholarship at the university and told Stu he wanted to start working, and he was like just, I think he had been such a student of the business, but he had been watching Brett and Dynamite and Davey and all these guys leading up to that time, and he was just like, bang, the second he hit the ring, he was like just incredible, and when he was working up here, he was working with a lot of guys that up till that time hadn't really set the world on fire. They had been kind of mid-card, and we had to sort of, I think you might know that old Mike Shaw or Bastion Booger or whatever.
Yeah.
And that was Owens, and he was doing some kind of cheesy heel thing as a born-again Pakistani, and and Owen was sort of contributed to that. It got good heat, though. They had, Mike Shaw with this Ravi Shankar music blaring, going out when he was coming out, and he had a turban, and he was, and I think they just had some big, unfortunate charade where some Air Canada jet had been bombed by the Sikh terrorists. So there was a fair bit of heat, and Owen had Mike Shaw talking about Seek and Ye Shall Find and all this other stuff. But anyway, Owen worked with him, and most of the fans used to refer to him as Toilet Bowl and all this other. But Owen, they did some incredible business. It took off, and Owen sort of, almost made it a personal issue to get Mike Shaw over, and he ended up doing, about a 2-year run as a top heel up here, which is.
And then and that was probably the direct reason he got the call from WCW. And
he went down there where Eric Bischoff or whoever, I think, turned him into whatever the. Norman, the lunatic.
It came in as a heel, and then he became the. I worked a bunch of times with him. Matter of fact, I think my first WCW pay-per-view was with Mike when he was kind of turned into lovable Norman and really had something good going there. And then, as you know, sometimes it's just replacement. The booker came in, and I don't think Ole was a big fan of his. It was a shame because he really was on a roll there. But I think the point is that, if Owen hadn't brought that, that out of him to where he had that top run, the heads wouldn't have been turned. He probably would not have gotten that call from WCW.
That's often not that easy. It's easy enough to work with the Dynamite Kids and those guys. But a guy like Mike Shaw, we had a lot of other guys up here that, couldn't have those kind of matches with him, and Owen seemed to be able to bring out the best of him,
What I'm hearing you both say is sort of classic to me, because when I started in Los Angeles, the first thing that Leo Garibaldi and Mike LaBelle and my brother and Chavo and all of them told me was, go watch The Champion. And it was Dory Funk at that time coming through Los Angeles, working with the local babyface, the local star.
Yeah, it doesn't get much better than this.
And they would always leave. Dory would always leave on Friday night after the big show, even though he didn't lose his title, he made the guy he was working with much better.
Yeah,
And I think, again, I got to interject this right here because you both are saying the same thing about Owen, and Bruce, you said that's what Owen liked about Mick here. And when I think of you, Mick, or I hear these stories about Owen, that's what comes back to my mind is hearing Leo Garibaldi telling this 18-year-old punk kid, go watch Dory Funk, go set up in the balcony and watch down and watch how he controls the people and controls the crowd and makes who he's wrestling better. And I really think that that's what this business is all about, is making each of us better by what we do in the ring. And I'm sorry I had to inject that, but I hear you guys saying it, and I just had to say that, man.
Valuable point.
I appreciate your. That was a very valid and good insight. And I might add that another of Mick's old buddies, Dory Funk's brother Terry, epitomized that too. You know, they were guys that had that innate ability to make almost anyone they worked with look in many cases better than they deserve to look, you know. But yeah, that's to me one of the things, the hallmarks of the really elite workers is you know, being able to make whoever and I remember Dory Funk was like that and Terry was like that, and anytime I ever saw Mick it was like that, you know. Anyone can, you know, work with the great workers, but it takes a great worker to take you know, the great Kelly or something like that and make them look like, you know.
I never pulled that off, I can assure you. You know, I was you know, kind of on a roll, you know, when I was doing the independents before I came back to WCW in 91. And, you know, you're under the impression you can make anybody look good, and then you find out, you know, you get, there are just sometimes just not meant to be, you know, and I don't want to name names, but there were some guys you just kind of threw up your hands, you just say, you know, I did the best I could.
The magnificent Zulo syndrome.
Hey, Mick and Bruce, let me real quick, man. We got another member of the Hart family calling in. Let me bring Ross on just for a few minutes to say hi to Mick and get a quick story in.
Hi, Bruce, and hi, Mick and Johnny. And Mick, I really enjoyed your comedy show you did in Calgary last year, and it was great hearing some of your stories of the business. And you're still lighthearted and good-humored about this business because it can be so stressful, and with all the injuries and the traveling and sometimes the lousy payoffs and you know, all the negatives, you still find a lot of good humor and enjoyable stories to tell about your experiences, and it was great hearing that, and I hope you'll be back up this way for another tour sometime, Mick.
Well, Ross, I appreciate that, and I had a great time there in Calgary, and it was so nice to have, you know, some of Owen's family there, and Diana was there, Natty was there. You know, it's such a compliment to me when, you know, someone says that, you know, like when someone says you remind me of my Uncle Owen, it's like, man, it's quite a compliment.
Absolutely. And Owen thought a lot of you, Mick. He enjoyed being on the road with you, enjoyed working with you, and he had the utmost respect and regard for you.
Yeah, just as a person, not just a wrestler.
Yeah, that was the most important thing. Ross, I was saying to Bruce, and don't ruin this for me if you know the answer, but, you know, I never actually knew. I never really, and now, I guess Bruce has answered it by saying Owen really respected the way I tried to go out and, you know, bring out the best in other people. But I remember, you know, after he died, I was like, I really don't know what he thought of me as a wrestler. Like, and that didn't matter, you know. The fact that we loved talking about, you know, we were the type of guys that would rush back, you know, and get on that 6 a.m. flight, you know, and do as many things we possibly could with the family. And, you know, you go out. Same thing. You try to have fun on the road while, you know, in a different way, you know. Than, you know, we didn't see our hotel rooms as prison cells, you know, like we, you know, enjoyed. Yeah. We, you know, to keep things lighthearted, but also respect the relationships at home.
Bruce, Ross, I keep getting these phone calls. I keep getting people calling in. I know I got a couple calling in here in just a minute, but I've had somebody holding. I want to bring Mike Lano on.
Mike knew Owen very well from Owen's trips to San Francisco and the Bay Area there, and Mike was one of the best photographers who caught some of Owen's great moments in the ring and even outside the ring. And
yeah, likewise, a great guy, Mike, and one of those old school journalists that really put the business over, and I've never heard anyone say a bad word about Dr. Mike.
Yeah, I really appreciate it because, I know you guys had a ton of great stars and stuff, and there isn't a week that goes by when we don't think of Owen and, of course, Helen and Stu. Really miss them terribly. But I'll be really brief. I don't have my notes in front of me as I had earlier, but I was with Owen in both New Japan when he and Benoit were there. Jericho, of course, worked a little bit later for Tenru's group, but this was New Japan, and room with them a couple of times in 1990 at the Keough Plaza Hotel. I think Owen had transitioned. He'd come in for WWF and worked as Blue Blazer, and then I think that was the interim. And then I was with him in Joel Goodhart's promotion, a huge mega card in Philadelphia. It was Joel Goodhart's very last TWA show, the predecessor to ECW, and that's where I think Owen met Mick Foley. And I posed him with Terry Funk, and this is Owen with Terry Funk and the Sheik, the original Sheik, and Kevin Sullivan, and just a wealth of talent. Abdullah the Butcher was no stranger to Calgary, and just tons and tons of people. And in terms of stories, Owen, whenever he would come into the Oakland, San Francisco, Northern California area, there's some famous Hart relatives, his aunt and uncle, as Bruce knows, and I drove Brett there once. But every time Owen came in, he wanted to go see them. They lived in a real well-to-do, fancy, it's called the Piedmont area of Oakland.
Yeah.
And
Windsor Avenue.
Yeah, really nice. I mean, that was how devoted Owen was. Anytime he was on the road, etc., he would call his wife Martha and the kids, etc. And he was so ethical. There's the ribs and all that stuff, the gentle ribs. He was certainly no Johnny Valentine in terms of mean ribs, but he was so fond of Jeff Jarrett. This was towards the end, and Deborah. And drove around with them, and every time I see Jeff Jarrett, he's always thankful. I took tons of pictures of them on the road and at diners and stuff, and at an autograph show, they were all booked in Northern California by this guy who's sort of made a living and a lot of money off booking Brett for stuff. But this same promoter, he had a set fee and what have you for Owen to sign for people, and then when it was over, this promoter tried asking Owen to sign, can you sign an extra 100 photos, 8x10s, and when you're gone, I'll sell them at my store. And Owen looked at him, and I've never seen anyone else, do this. And Owen said, if I do this, it's going to devalue my autograph and my signature and all of that. And he was dead serious, and a lot of wrestlers would have not given an intelligent rationale for not wanting to be taken advantage of, and Owen did. And there was another great story at the I covered since 1966 for the magazines, the Mark Mags. I was a photographer and writer, covered every territory except Calgary, and that was on my bucket list before I die. And Bruce, who's like a brother to me, was so kind to invite me up with Ross. And Owen and Spicoli, that was his best friend at that time, his road mate with WWF. They picked me up at Calgary Airport. I've told this to Bruce before. And Owen, if anyone has ever ridden in the car with Owen, you want to take over the wheel and not let Owen drive because we couldn't see. The snow was coming down big time. It was December 14th, 1995. And Owen's cursing like a sailor. And I don't know how he got us to where we had to be, the Hart Mansion, I think it was, before doing press, in one piece without getting us killed. But then we go to the hotel. We go to the hotel where everything is happening, and I'll never forget this. Owen looks and he sees Razor and 1-2-3 Kid, and they look like two messes, against each other, sleeping against each other on the couch. But you could tell they were messed up, and Owen said something like, "Those guys are really effed up, aren't they?" And Spicoli and he just were on the floor with Pillman laughing and laughing and laughing, and all those shots I've got of Owen and Pillman and Chris Jericho, and the second Dan
Dorian
Crawford,
Terry, I think.
Not the original Dan Crawford, but the one that was in all.
Yeah, Phil LaFleur. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
they just were on the floor laughing. It's just being around Owen. It was really, now you look at it and you treasure the times that you did. And I think all of the big stars you've had on, from the Godwins, etc. And I'm going to be sending Bob Johnson some pictures to put up of Owen posing with the original Sheik and Abby and Mick, of course, the first time they ever met. And even Medusa put this parrot on Owen's head, and Owen didn't balk at it. His big giant macaw, these photos I have of him climbing all over Owen. He's just a wonderful, wonderful person, and you don't really meet anybody like that, real genuine, great people in wrestling. But I can tell you, before people really discovered him in WWF, if you could only see what I got to see right at ringside of him in Japan, with the mask, without the mask, in Mexico, and then I'll shut up. He filled in for somebody. I don't know who he was scheduled in Germany for Otto Wanz against Terry Funk, and the people, they didn't really know who he was, but when he went in there, he just blew them away and had an amazing match with Terry. I think it was it might have been the only time they ever had a singles match, but it was a 2 out of 3 thing for Otto Wanz in Europe. Oh, then one last thing. At that Joel Goodhart show back in Philly, he was wrestling, I think it was Kunihiko Kobayashi, New Japan, pretty famous worker. I think that was the guy's name. But anyway, the audience was so dumb. They were chanting Chop Suey. And when we get to the back, backstage, Owen is talking to Sheik and Abby. He goes, he just couldn't believe the crowd was chanting Chop Suey, which is a Chinese, it's an Americanized Chinese food at a Japanese worker who was, that caliber. And they had a 5-star match. The ring ropes broke. The one guy lost his boot, the New Japan boy, lost his boot, and they had a 5-star match. And so when they stopped chanting Chop Suey, they gave it a standing ovation. Everybody was screaming 5-star match. They didn't know who this kid Owen Hart was, but he blew everybody in hardcore Philadelphia, New Jersey away. And that's just a testament to the great Owen Hart. Yeah, it meant a lot to me to be able to talk about Owen because he just was one in a million, and great person like all of the Harts, who are family to us all. But we just miss the guy to this day, and again, we all think of him. And the business had a real huge part of its heart torn out when he passed. It's never going to be the same, and it isn't the same. It's been like 15 years since Owen passed. Yeah. Oh, and another thing, that Party School, it's about 40 minutes away from me. It's number 2 ranked now with Pepperdine near Malibu, where all the movie stars live, is the Party School of the U.S.
Mike, thanks so much for calling in tonight, Mike. God bless you, my friend. Hey, let me bring on Barry Orton real quick. Barry, how are you tonight? Johnny Mantell, Bruce, and Ross.
Hey, Johnny. Hey, Bruce. Hey, Ross. How you guys doing, man?
I'd like to say Owen held you in the highest respect, and you had some incredible matches with him up here in Calgary, so I'm delighted that you saw fit to call in, and thank you.
Owen, of course, to me, was one of the first guys I ever saw do the acrobatics, and just the way that he filtered it into what he did and the timing of it, and he never overdid it, and it was always a surprise when he did it, and he was just amazing. He was like, I'm sorry I'm all tongue-tied. I was so into what Mike was saying, man. I kind of blew me off into another part of the universe.
I know Owen, as I've told you before, Barry, he had the utmost respect for you in the ring and the job you were doing. You were sort of like one of those cutting-edge, visionary-type guys who really was about 20 years ahead of his time, and Owen used to tell me that, how much he loved not only working with you, but just sharing perspectives with you, and you sort of came from the same background with, your dad and your Stu, so you guys were sort of second generation, and Owen had a lot of, you always felt like sort of a kinship toward you, and I can't tell you how many times Owen used to be just amazed and incredibly impressed with the stuff you were doing up here, and I don't think a lot of the people, maybe outside of Western Canada, even have any idea how great the Zodiac stuff you were doing up here was. Like, 20 years ahead of its time, and I venture to say I haven't seen anything as good as that in WWE or anywhere else. So I definitely, and I think you know how well Owen and all the other Harts held you and your brother and your father in great respect.
Well, yeah, I really appreciate that. I really do. And it was an honor working with Owen, and it was easy. And it was always an honor working with you as well. But Owen was just a master on so many levels. I think last night I compared him to Picasso. Because wrestling is, after all, a craft and an art. And he was just a natural, man. It was inherent in everything within him. And so yeah, he was phenomenal on so many levels, and he got it, and he understood it, and he was able to generate an energy every time we were in the ring that lifted me up, and of course wanted me to do the best that I could do as well. And it's an honor working with him, and it's just really regretful that the world had something taken away from it that was gonna, I think, flourish. And by now, my God, it would have been unbelievable where he would have been, and the things that he would have accomplished.
Hey, Ross, Bruce, I hate to cut it short, man. I had a couple things I wanted to say on, but we got about a minute before I got to go to this interview with Jeff Jarrett, and I know you want to get this on at the end so the fans can hear it. So a real quick good night from Ross and Bruce, and I'll turn it over to the interview.
Okay, thanks, Johnny. Well, I just want to thank all the fans for thoughts and memories of Owen and how much he contributed to the business, and he just put smiles on faces of wrestlers he worked with, guys that he traveled with, promoters, and thousands of fans everywhere. And it's great that they're still thinking of him even 15 years after, and he still keeps all of us alive.
I'd like to thank everyone for their input and just sharing some Owen stories tonight. And awesome job, Johnny. I can't thank you enough for the great job you did of moderating, and I'd like to thank everybody else for coming on today. I'm gratified.
I'm going to take one thing away from this night, and I'm going to tell you that, and that is family, family, and family. And sometimes we don't always get along. Sometimes we dispute, and we sort of see things differently. At the end of the day, it's still family. And whether it's family by name or family by business, we're still that family. And I felt that tonight hearing the stories about Owen. I felt that tonight hearing the stories about how important this business was. And, Bruce, you and I have talked about it. Ross and I talked about it up in Amsterdam this last week, that this business is very important, and it has to stay relevant to the world today. And I think this show tonight, telling the life and times and the stories of Owen, has really spelled that out on how important this business is.
Very well put, Johnny. I couldn't agree with you more, and I hope some of the people listening out there, got some satisfaction and maybe even some inspiration from hearing some of the stories. And I totally agree, and I'd like to just once again thank everybody for all their input, and God bless.
Absolutely, and God bless everybody listening to this interview. It's Bruce Hart and Jeff Jarrett.
It's a real honor and a privilege to have one of Owen's closest friends and colleagues in the wrestling business, Jeff Jarrett, here on the show. And Owen not only had the highest regard for Jeff as a wrestler, but also as a person, and he was one of the guys that Owen had the most respect for in this business. So I'd like to point out to any of the fans out there, Owen and Jeff sort of had similar backgrounds. They both were sons of well-known wrestlers and promoters, and I think they grew up in the business, so that may have been one reason why they identified with each other and had so much in common. But anyway, it's a real pleasure to have Jeff on, and I'd just like to, maybe endeavor to get some Owen stories and maybe a few perspectives from Jeff. Even I guess just I wouldn't mind hearing just unfortunate night that the accident happened. Just a bit of perspective what it was like, and then maybe after that we can tell a few Owen stories, maybe including some of his infamous practical jokes and some of that other. But yeah, welcome aboard, Jeff, and I wouldn't mind just getting a bit of perspective. It must have been kind of somewhat surrealistic that night in Kansas City, May 23rd, 99. But yeah, I wouldn't mind getting some perspectives on you, just sort of if there's anything that really stands out or you might recall leading up to it or whatever else.
Bruce, I'm making sure I'm trying to hear you. Just the connection's a little rough. You're wanting me to what was going through my head the night of May 23rd? Yeah, maybe just I won't get too much into it. Just just sort of what it was, the scene that night, maybe leading up to it, and if there was anything that really stood out in your mind. Well, first off, I appreciate you having me on the show, and you said it very well that me and Owen, we had, like yourself, had very similar backgrounds. Both of our fathers were wrestlers and promoters, and that's one of the things that obviously connected me and Owen the very first day we met. But with that being said, it was one of those things when me and Owen would make trips together, get together, and all the time we spent hours and hours and hours on the road together, is that we didn't really talk wrestling all the time. We would on occasion, and obviously when we were partners, we would definitely be talking wrestling. But in general, we used to talk about life and family, and with Owen's personality, it was never a dull moment. And so, quite frankly, this show is honoring the 15th anniversary. But I don't, and I've never really given that night a lot of thought, even back in the days and weeks and months that followed the tragic accident. I like to remember Owen, on a 1,000% positive note, because that night was quite simply, one of the most tragic nights of my life, of this industry, and it was very it was a very unfortunate situation. I can't even describe. I know the pain that I felt and that wrestling fans felt, but I can't imagine the pain that the kids went through and that continue to go through. But like I said, I like to look back in my memories of Owen, and he's world famous for his infamous practical jokes, pranks, ribs, whatever you want to call them. But I did an interview not long ago, and Owen's name came up, and they said, "What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you talk about when you think about Owen?" And 9 times out of 10, most people would probably say either a great wrestler or the number one prankster or practical joke. The first thing that comes to my mind is integrity. Owen just had it. He had it, and he carried himself in a way that was very unique. I guess I could say non-traditional wrestler-like, because he had a viewpoint on life that was second to none. He knew his priorities. They were family first. He loved this business, very dedicated to it, took it very serious. He could have a great match with just about any style. And so, those are the top line thoughts off the top of my head. And May 23rd, 99, I don't really like to think about that night.
Yeah, I can appreciate that, and I appreciate the other perspectives. Those are some of the things I myself prefer to remember Owen in that light too. It's almost forgotten, or a lot of people almost don't realize, first off, what a good person Owen was, and he's one of those guys who always, I know up here, and whenever I did a few tours in WWE with him, and he always seemed to give off good energy. He was always upbeat in the dressing room, and I more than a few times I'd walk in there and guys had had a long day, or they were kind of down, or a few long faces, and Owen seemed to always bring up the energy level. He always seemed to have something good to say, or he'd be up to some kind of mischief or something, but he always seemed to give off good energy, which sort of picked up the boys. And in the ring he was I always thought he was underappreciated, and certainly in WWE. I think just around the time when he unfortunately died, I think he was finally starting to be appreciated. Maybe he'd come out from Brett's shadow or whatever, and was being recognized for being, a great worker. He was just like you said, and that's the highest compliment you can pay to a wrestler, is that they can work with damn near anyone and make them look good, and there's only a handful of guys, yourself included, that are capable of that, and Owen was one of those types who he could go out with some guy like the Great Khali or Mark Henry and make him look good, or he could put in time, or he could work heel or face, or adapt to almost any situation. And those are some of the things that are almost I thought were almost underappreciated in WWE. I think some of the boys knew that, but all too often a lot of the fans, I don't think, were quite aware of how gifted and how really talented Owen was. And those are some of the things I hope some of the today's fans might remember or be made aware of, relevant to Owen. And as far as the practical jokes go, they bring a smile to my face, but I know he pulled. He seemed to pull them on anyone and everyone. There might be a few you might have had pulled on you, or may have been witness to, Jeff.
Well, Owen, and as I sit here in my office thinking about the different stories, and actually I've got a picture in my office of me and Owen, and everybody knew his practical side, or practical joke side and all that, but as far as being a mentor in the dressing room, he would put suggestions, and he would give suggestions to young guys or old guys alike, and Owen was very well respected for his ability in the ring, and they knew that he was as technically sound as any athlete who's ever wrestled, and also he had a passion for it, and really loved the business. And he would tell me about his stories in Japan when he was going over there, and it's just something where he grew and evolved from Mexico to Japan, obviously, and then his WWF run. So very, very well respected wrestler.
Yeah, I appreciate those perspectives, and I was going to ask you, Jeff, if given that you were one of Owen's closest friends and colleagues in the business, is there anything you might like to say relevant to his kids, Oj and Athena? They were both pretty young at the time. I often wonder if they even kind of knew their dad, that well. They were both pretty small at that time, 15 years ago, but.
Yeah, I mean, Martha has done a fantastic job raising OG and Athena, and she's a wonderful person. After Owen's passing, with the foundation, and she continued her education, and gave those kids a great root, great foundation, and OG and Athena, they realized their father was a man's man, a wrestler's wrestler. Everyone in this industry had the utmost respect for Owen. His legacy and his passion for the business, and his passion, more importantly than the business, for life, will continue on and on and on forever. And that is something that
was very well put, Jeff. I greatly appreciate that, and I'm sure they'll be moved by that. And I'd just like to thank you, Jeff, for coming on. If there's anything in winding up that you'd like to say, that'd be fine. And I'd just like to thank you very much again for not only coming on today, but for everything you've done to perpetuate Owen's memory and everything you did at that time. I remember you were a great source of comfort to our family. I remember when you came on Monday Night Raw the day after the accident, and the speech and the things that you said meant a great deal to our family, especially my mom and dad. They were quite moved by what you said, and you were also a real pillar at Owen's funeral. I can't say enough about how helpful and supportive you were. So I'd like to just thank you again for all of that, and appreciate all you've done.
Well, I appreciate you having me on the show, Bruce. It goes without saying, the Hart family is legendary in this business. You guys have had your ups and downs, but you're the Hart. And Owen was that special and unique, and I don't mind telling you or any of the Harts, Owen was so super special, not just to me, but I know he was to your family and the wrestling fans. And the night after his passing, that was very difficult. But that time I was overcome with emotion. But I wanted to tell the world that this, and I've said it over and over. Owen had integrity. He was real, and he was just a man's man. And I was lucky and blessed enough to be, one of his good friends and colleagues and coworkers. And I'm thankful that I have Owen Hart memories for the rest of my life.